Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Reed. So glad to be here with you today for the webinar, Rethinking Thanksgiving by Dismantling Colonial Myths, Uplifting Indigenous Rights, and Honoring Mother Earth. I'm part of Indigenous Solidarity Network, one of the groups organizing this webinar. I'm calling in from unceded Abenaki land in southern Vermont. I'm a white, trans, genderqueer settler wearing a black hoodie with an illustration of bat in American Sign Language, and I have a tan curtain behind me. In this first part, I'm going to pass it to my comrade Aniance to translate what was said into Spanish.
Hola a todos, me llamo Nico y estoy llamando desde la tierra del pueblo Anacostan y Piscataway, estoy en otras partes, se llama Maryland. Tengo puesto una sudadera negra, tengo una barba con un poco de canas, estoy aquí en mi patio atrás. Nos complace darles la bienvenida nuevamente al webinario Repensando el Día de Acción de Gracias, desmontando mitos coloniales, elevando los derechos indígenas y honrando a la Madre Tierra. Ya hay más de 800 personas en esta convocatoria, increíble. Formo parte de la organización 350, uno de los grupos que organiza este webinario. En esta primera parte voy a pasar la palabra a mi compañera, Reed para que siga explicando cómo hacemos la interpretación. Go ahead, Reed.
Thank you. This is Reed. The organizers of this webinar have a commitment to disability and language justice and believe these are necessary for dismantling white supremacy and decolonizing. We believe all of us are necessary to create a future with collective care, accountability, relationships that honor our interdependence, and where language diversity thrives. We acknowledge the times we are living in, over 1 year of genocide in Palestine, 1 year from the passing of beloved mentor and organizer Tupac Enrique Acosta, and acknowledge this webinar is during Trans Awareness Week.
Habla Nico. Los organizadores de este webinario están comprometidos con la discapacidad y la justicia lingüística y creemos que son necesarias para desmantelar la supremacía blanca y para descolonizarnos. Creemos que todos somos necesarios para crear un futuro con cuidados colectivos, responsabilidad, relaciones que honren nuestra interdependencia y en el que prospere la diversidad lingüística. Reconocemos los tiempos que estamos viviendo, más de 1 año de genocidio en Palestina, 1 año del fallecimiento del querido mentor y organizador Tupac Enrique Acosta, y reconocemos que este webinario es durante la semana de concientización trans.
This is Reed. Before we get started, I want to go over the accessibility features for today's webinar. If you'd like to listen to this webinar in Spanish, please select the interpretation globe icon in the Zoom menu bar. On your smartphone, click the three dots at the bottom of your screen and select the language. If you have any trouble accessing the Spanish language channel, you can reach out for support in chat.
Ahora habla Nico. Antes de comenzar, quisiera repasar las características de accesibilidad para el webinario de hoy. Si desea escuchar este webinario en español, por favor, seleccione el icono del globo terráqueo en el fondo de su pantalla, en la barra del menú en el fondo de su pantalla. En su celular, presione los tres puntos en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma deseado. De aquí en adelante, si tiene dificultad accediendo al canal de español, pide ayuda en el chat.
This is Reed. Simultaneous Spanish interpretation will now start, provided by our wonderful Spanish interpreters, Andreina and Natalia. The ASL interpreters, Yasmin and Amber, will be spotlit, which means their video will be featured on the Zoom screen and show up next to the presenter's video. We also have live captioning available during this call, thanks to Emma and Jocelyn. To view live captions or a full transcript, click the CC icon on the Zoom menu bar. We will also include a link to a document that shows how to access captions. If we have any technical issues with Spanish or ASL interpretation or live captions, we will pause the webinar to correct the issue. Please reach out in chat if you are having any accessibility issues or questions. And we ask when a speaker is presenting that you only use the chat for access-related issues. If you have questions for the presenters, you can post those in the Q&A feature. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will pass it over to Evie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ishban Cinco. No one yolke no toka oselo sochi iwan ikanawa. Ika English. My name is Ivrea Zagiri. I am Iskaloteca Mexica Azteca. I am wearing glasses, a green sweater, and I am an Indigenous woman that works for the organization who is directly benefiting from our webinar today, Dona Tierra. We are located in Autumn Territory here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we serve as an embassy for Indigenous peoples. So I really want to say thank you and so much gratitude to all of our relatives who are joining us from near and far, from all Indigenous territories in which you are residing. Thank you. I would also like to say a special thank you to our flute player relative, Curtis Waterman, who is Beaver Clan from the Onondaga Nation. Curtis resides on the Onondaga Nation, south of Syracuse, New York. He is a self-taught flute and harmonica player, and Curtis gets his inspiration from his listeners. Curtis's flute sound is said to transport his listeners to a place of calm and serenity, which I can attest to because he started us off in a really good way, grounding us for this tough conversation and information session that we have before you. This year's theme is Dismantling Colonial Myths and Uplifting Indigenous Rights and Honoring Mother Earth. And all of our speakers are going to be integrating all of these topics throughout their conversation as they talk about the work that they're doing on a local community level as well as on the international level. This webinar is also created so that we can make connections and build solidarity and alliances and networks as we continue to work together to move forward in honoring Earth and making sure that we are protecting our future generations and their livelihood by protecting our planet that we all share together. I did just want to also remind the speakers that when you do speak, to please give just 2 descriptors at the minimum for our folks that need accessibility attention. And then I also just wanted to reiterate the call for only using the chat for access-related questions. And please save your questions for the Q&A section coming towards the end of our webinar. Next, I'd like to pass the mic over to a dear friend of mine and colleague for many years, Betty Lyons. Betty is a citizen of the Onondaga Nation and the executive director for the American Indian Law Alliance. Again, she is a dear friend and colleague that we've worked together for over 15 years at the United Nations and supporting each other's organizations for quite some time. So thank you, Betty, for joining us.
Haskano, thank you, Evie, so much. This is Betty. I am a citizen of the Onondaga Nation. I have black wavy hair. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a snipe necklace, which is my clan. I'm grateful to be here. First, I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker, Juan Mancesas. He is the tribal chair of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe of Texas, born in DeMitt, Texas, and raised in Plainview. Juan is the eldest born to a lineage of hereditary chiefs of the Carrizo Comecrudo and is a dedicated protector of the land, the environment, and the Carrizo Comecrudo sacred sites. The Carrizo Comecrudo tribe has opposed the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, including liquefied natural gas, export facilities, and pipelines are proposed along the Gulf Coast, where these projects threaten sacred sites, contaminate water sources, and encroach on the tribe's ancestral lands. Recently, Mancesas has led efforts to divest from a block of LNG developments in South Texas, especially those that are destroying sacred sites such as Garcia Pasture, Boca Chica Beach, central to the Carrizo Comecrudo creation story, and the South Bay, where SpaceX threatens to destroy the balance of life and contaminate with wastewater dumping and space rocket explosions. He has worked with environmental and indigenous rights organizations to amplify awareness and the environmental and cultural harms associated with these projects, aiming to protect both the land and the rights of his people, and is organizing against environmental racism due to the disproportionate impacts these projects have on Indigenous and low-income communities. In addition, Mancesas is deeply involved in educational efforts, shedding light on the past and ongoing harm caused by colonialism and fossil fuel build-out with its industrial encroachment. So I'm welcoming Juan now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. Itayaple maute pele nawazo. Lekau is the Yanawi Skiaponic. Anadluum the Unquelam Kimla. And I'm here because I want to talk about not just rethinking, but maybe getting rid of Thanksgiving. And a lot of it has to do for us that we have our traditional ways of dealing with things, and we have our Thanksgiving days. And if you have a chance, there's a YouTube documentary that I did a few years ago, and it's been going around the world now. It's called The Teaching of the Hands, and shows how we're connected to everything around us. We're even connected to the days and the seasons, how everything is important to us. One of the things that I've done, I've written papers, and one paper that I wrote was I submitted to the Sovereignty Symposium a few years back in '94, and I'm sorry, '96, '98, and and it was a paper called ERG, the ethnic, religious, gender stratification theory. And I did it for one of my Christic classes when I was doing my master's. I do want to always emphasize the fact that we've been aware of the words assimilation, acculturation, that they say that a lot of us as Native people have become part of. But in reality, the assimilation with what happened through the resident schools and also the boarding schools, and of course out here in the Southwest, we had the mission schools and the treatment of our people. The evidence lies in the petroglyphs and the pictographs that are all through the middle of Texas. There's a petroglyph just around between a little town called Post and Snyder, Texas, on Highway 84, and there it shows they blocked it and made it into a reservoir for water for the little towns around there. It's called Lake Ellen Henry, but it's underwater, and I guess right now it's not underwater because the water's really lacking, and we're having a drought just about everywhere. And but it shows what the Spaniards did when they first came. They took my ancestors, took them into the missions, and were cutting off their feet and cutting off their hands and decapitating them. These were the priests that were doing it. So a lot of it has to do with trying to recognize the fact that there's not an assimilation process that took place, but more of a coercion that was forced on us. And basically through the schooling system, when they cut our hair, the whole adage, kill the Indian, save the man kind of mentality, which is also very patriarchal. But I think that we have to look at what is the reality of what was happening in Texas. For 500 years, we've been dealing with that mentality, and now they came here for one reason. They came for the reason of extracting the resources that were here, and now 500 years later, they're still extracting resources and exporting them over to Europe and to other countries now. But they used to export them over to Europe, all the gold and everything else that was taken, silver, anything they could find, the buffalo hides, everything that they could get out of here. Even our women and our children were exported. One of the things that we're very cognizant of is the history that we have, and I think I live by the adage of saying, "Hey, change the narrative." If we can change the narrative, I think that we can start looking at what they're really not saying, what they're trying to do. One of the things is here in Texas, they passed the protest law. And then that protest, I happened to be there, and I was singing my songs while they were trying to vote on it. And I wouldn't leave until I finished my last song. And but they were talking about critical infrastructures. The critical infrastructures could not be impeded, which were anything tying or locking yourself to anything, blocking any kind of future progress that they call progress. That was their idea of critical infrastructure. Their oil wells, even the wall was a critical infrastructure. And what we did was we held a freedman cemetery where there were some of our people that were buried at, and even a Confederate soldier was buried there, and they were going to dig them all out so they could build this so-called wall that Obama and Trump wanted to put in his first term. And we sat there for a year and a half until we won, a way to be able to get a report from them. So they recognized our presence at this place because we knew where these villages were. So we looked at this whole thing of critical infrastructure and what it meant to them. And when I say them, I'm talking about the fossil fuel industry, the corporations, the big money, the rich people. Even SpaceX became an issue, and of course, Now you can see it even more because they do change the marketing, and it's false marketing. But the whole idea with critical infrastructure for them was those oil wells and, you know, the rocket ships and what they have going on right now. That's their critical stuff. For us, as original people of the lands here, we have the air, the water, and the land, and the human beings, and the environment. These are the things that are important to us. And we have to stand fast to that. And that's what we've been doing. And we've actually kept them from building those LNGs. Right now, they're doing what they call site preparation. And the reason they're doing site preparation is because they don't want to call it construction. And so we can probably impede the site preparation and legally. And so we're doing whatever we can, and we're holding them back on a lot of these issues, especially Garcia Pastor. And but for 500 years, I mean, I've had to deal with the excuse me, there's phone's ringing. Hold on, it is. We have had to deal with this issue of their concept and ideas of how to accept this colonization, if you want to call it. But for us, it's more about reconnecting. So there's no assimilation because of what they're trying to do. It's still brainwashing in a sense by trying to sell the concept with false marketing when they say, hey, look, you know, we need the oil, we need plastics, and we need this and we need that because that's progress. But the problem with me, and I've been to the INC talks, and I'm fixing to go to that's a Texas thing. Going to Korea to speak at the INC 5 again from the plastic treaty talk that they're doing. And one of the times that I went, I sat with a scientist, and they asked me if I had anything to say. I said, yes, I do, because I believe that we need to recognize the fact that the questions that we have is, where did your science go wrong and ours wasn't working? Because indigenous knowledge is very important, because 500 years ago, we had a baseline. If you want to look at the baseline, it's 1491. We had clean water, clean air, everything was clean. And we could drink right out of the river and bathe in the river and still be part of what's going on. And we knew how to live with one another. We had agreements. We had ways to deal with each other. And we traded, we bartered. And we bartered and traded what we needed, not what we wanted. And I think that that's a lot to do with you know, our ideas and teachings that we have that need to be utilized even in the way that we deal with them in the courts, because they have no concept of natural law anymore. It's all based on that doctrine of discovery mentality. And for us, you know, trying to change that narrative is, for us as natives, is we have to reconnect. I don't think that there's a colonization that has happened to us. It is that we've been forced and brainwashed to be moved away. So we haven't acculturated to them either. There's no two worlds. When you say we live in two worlds, then we're saying that we're acculturated, and we're not. We're still a people that have life ways. Our ways of life are every day, and our spirit is every day. And I think that coming from professors and PhD people who are not native, and talking about acculturation, when they don't have a culture, what are we acculturating to nothing? So I keep telling them we live in the United States of Generica, because it's all generic. And I think that we have to understand that we have to get away from that genericism. And I really believe that there's and I call it secular genericism, when people like Elon Musk doesn't care how many turtles he kills, how many of the sacred mounds that were on the beach are destroyed, and how many pieces of rocket fall on top of other people's houses, how much noise he does. They forgive themselves for that kind of stuff, and that's the secularism of what this country is founded on, because they did it because this was God's land. Of course it was. I mean, the whole world is. And I think that we have to understand that we have to expand that. And when I hear them say, God bless America, I'm asking myself, what about the rest of the world? There's a lot of poor people, and the sacrifices and the genocide that continues to this day and perpetuated by that mentality of, I can do whatever I want because this is our lands. Well, that's not true, because to us, we're not the owners of the land. The land actually owns us. I am the land because my ancestors are the land and my predecessors will be the land. And I think that that's important to understand when we speak about, rethinking Columbus Day, because for us, it's really hard to be thankful on that day. I haven't celebrated that stuff for a long time, but I love turkey. We have a turkey clan, so we find a way to, to get together anyway, and we get together every weekend as clans, And I didn't mention I'm a Bear Clan of the Northern Canyons, and so I have to be able to solidify the fact that we need to be able to be connected to what's there, reconnect to what our ancestors died for, and it's not just the spiritual moment, because in me, when they ask me, "Are you a spiritual person?" I'll say, "Yes, I am," but my spirituality is based on my ancestors' tears, their sweat, their blood, and their anguish. That's where my spirituality lies, and that's a connection that we have to make. I did a quick thing with the commemoration of, and I didn't even know why they were asking me, but because I'm so controversial when I speak like this, but the commemoration of San Antonio for their 300th anniversary, and they asked all the faith leaders to come, and I said, okay, I'll be there. And then my first question was, what's a faith leader? I don't know what a faith leader is, because we don't have that kind of word in my language. And they said, well, you need to pray. And I'm going to say, well, we don't have that word in our language either. We have the closest thing to what you consider prayer is we remember. And you keep telling me to forget the past. When you tell me to forget the past, you're telling me to forget my ancestors. And I can't do that. I have to be able to maintain that connection with my ancestors. And I want you to know that I remember the person who put that petroglyph of what happened to my ancestors when they were cutting their feet and cutting their hands and cutting their throats at those missions. And I remember, the young lady who crossed that river and got shot in the back of the head by the ICE agent. And I said, I remember the 36 men that got hung right here at the council house right in front of this church, right there where you're sitting. I said, there were 36 of them. I remember them too. And I just walked off, because that's my prayer. Well, I have no litany. I have nothing else. I only have to be able to recognize that the words have got to change, and that we have to reconnect as Native people. And the rest of you who are really brainwashed need to decolonize. And yes, we need to rethink it together, because the people that are connected, the ones that are here today, are offering you a chance to reconnect to what's there already. Thank you.
This is Betty. Thank you so much, Juan. That was an amazing speech, and you got me at the end. I'm kind of choked up a little bit. because I imagine that every time you have to even say something like that, that it also touches your heart as well. I just want to remind all of our speakers to use descriptors when they first come on. And to all of you that are listening, please keep the comments to the chat to access related questions or comments, please, just so that we can help, we can help folks that are in need of getting translation. Next, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine, Sarah Nahar of Anti-Colonial Events. Sarah is a graduate of Spelman College, Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, and she is currently a PhD candidate at Syracuse University and the State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Yes, she's going for 2 PhDs. Both schools are located on Onondaga Nation land, my home. Her work is at the intersections of ecological sanitation, community organizing, and spiritual activism. She is also passionate about connections between Black feminists, womanists, Indigenous feminists, and matrilinealists. For this, she hopes to make a joint pilgrimage to the Combahee River in 2027 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Combahee River Collective Statement and restore our relationship with that place and each other. So without further ado, I introduce you to Sarah Nahar.
Thank you, Betty. Hello, I am Sarah Nahar, a light brown-skinned woman with black curly hair, wearing a big smile and a multicolored keffiyeh. It is so meaningful to be here with you today as we rethink Thanksgiving, rethinking that myth of the first American Thanksgiving feast as one of those false stories we've been told. A story that erases unequal power relations and erases intense suffering that one has helped us remember. So it's good to be with you, to reorient ourselves in this disorienting times, to tell stories that hold the depth of our deep histories and life ways. That is why we are here. There are so many ways that the almost 900 of you who are tuning in live are doing this right now. Thank you for weaving with us today, and greetings to all of those who are using the recording. One of the ways this Rethinking Thanksgiving call has helped the process of relearning and repairing and reconnecting is launching Anti-Colonial Arrivants a couple of years ago on this call. Anti-Colonial Arrivants is a group dedicated to making space for folks who are not Indigenous to Turtle Island, but also who are not white, to figure out how to do our own work about what it means to live here, now. Though our ancestors were brought here against our will, or more recently arrived here due to imperialist economic violence in our ancestral places of origin, Eve Tuck and Larry Yang calls this following the stolen resources and finding ourselves here in places, right? So though there isn't a really commonly used term for those of us who aren't whites and aren't Indigenous here, are we unwilling settlers? Are we guests? Are we forced immigrants? But arrivants, which is a term used by Caribbean poet Kamau Braithwaite and Indigenous scholar Jody Bird, that term might assist us in forming a political force. On our quarterly calls, we come together to closely examine this emergent language because words can create worlds. But most importantly, we come together to share and to learn what decolonial solidarity means for us as non-Indigenous, non-white people. The multicultural or settler state shores up its colonial project through racialized inclusivity initiatives and economic incentives to our communities. Therefore, we have the opportunity to resist the capturing of our lives and labor and recreate alliances. So I have a lot of gratitude to the Rethinking Thanksgiving team that has worked together over the years and helped to create new formations that can do this work. Anti-colonial arrivance locates the originating harm that we're trying to heal in the doctrine of discovery and domination. These are papal bulls, that is Catholic Church decrees from 1452 onward, which created the legal, religious, and political framework of conquest, enslavement, and extraction all over the world. A link in the chat will appear so you can learn more about that. And we'll dive deeper into it on the follow-up webinar on November 24, as we seek to support the emergence of anti-colonial, anti-racist movements and connect with those throughout history that have happened. So anti-colonial arrivance is a small victory happening today in these times, as it matters that racialized folks are coming together to educate ourselves, to grieve racist, colonial, and Christian hegemonic violence on us, and to articulate our entanglement and complicity in ongoing dispossession of Indigenous peoples, lands, waters, airs. So, if you are a person of the global majority living on Turtle Island, feel free to fill out the form to join the listserv that will appear in the chat. Or if you're not, but you wish to send this opportunity to a comrade of yours who you think could benefit from this space, please do so. Communities of color have experienced intense devastation. We also have financial, communal, and institutional resources in our communities. Therefore, it's my honor to invite everyone right now, both settlers and arrivants, to consider making a donation. Links will be in the chat as I continue to talk. We are making a bold ask and doing a fundraiser for Tona Tierra at this time. These are the times to make the asks for the support that we need. And I'm going to start this by letting you know that the first 25 people who donate $500 or more today will get a special thank you package from Tona Tierra. That will be some art and coffee from their Indigenous cooperative. We are grateful for whatever you choose to give. And for those of you who are able to reach deep and share, this first ask is to invite you to give $500 or more. Thank you to each of you for considering, and I'm grateful to pass it back to Betty.
This is Betty. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's so great to hear your voice, your calming voice. And you're right, during these definite turbulent times. Our next speaker is Aisha Mansour. Aisha is a Palestinian Muslim grassroots organizer who currently resides in Oakland, California. That's a lone territory. While living in exile from her homeland, she was raised in Seattle, Washington, with her immediate family and is proud to be the oldest of 5 rambunctious siblings. Aisha comes to honor the earth with an internationalist ethic and is guided by her commitment to anti-colonial struggles globally. Aisha is a graduate from San Francisco State University, where she received her master's degree in ethnic studies. Aisha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Betty. It's nice to see you. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha. I have brown hair. I'm a young 28-year-old. I'm wearing a red kufiya from Palestine that I got during my last trip. And I'm really excited to be here and talk to you all. I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, We are a transnational, grassroots, youth-led Arab organization organizing in diaspora. Basically, our role is to engage Arab youth and allow them to see their role and responsibility as active agents in their struggle. Just because we were displaced from our homeland doesn't mean that we are any less than, and doesn't mean that we have any less of a responsibility to our liberation. I'm also an organizer and the communications director at Honor the Earth. We're an Indigenous organization that's now based out of Montana. And we have been doing a lot of Palestine solidarity work with the PYM. And so together we have engaged on a campaign called Mask Off Mursk, which I want to talk to you all about today and give you guys some next steps in terms of ways that you can plug in. I just want to say that it's really an honor to be on this call with such amazing elders and organizers. And it's quite hard to sit here and talk to you about a celebration of the genocide of Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island as we watch the same administration and the same government facilitate the genocide of my people, Indigenous people in Palestine, and use many of the same tactics. So, you know, right now, many different UN agencies have called this a genocide, given the fact that over 92% of the population in Gaza are on the verge of famine. Virtually every hospital and school has been targeted with indiscriminate bombing campaigns. Biological warfare and systematic rape is now being used against the Palestinian population in Gaza, and the borders are closed. So no one is allowed to enter and no one is allowed to leave. And so basically what we're seeing is the slow genocide of our people in the world's largest open air prison. And we have been organizing tirelessly for the past 13 months since the beginning of this genocide, and before, but especially since the genocide has started. Many Palestinian organizers will tell you that we haven't slept. And at first, our big push was to get our government to demand a ceasefire. And we pushed this on the local level. We pushed this through city councils at our schools. Then we pushed this at the state level until we got to, you know, the Democratic Party at the national level. And quickly we learned that the word ceasefire actually means nothing when the US government, both the Democrats and the Republicans, are insistent on sending billions of dollars of aid or of military supplies and a military budget to Israel. So we had to have a conversation about what does it mean to move from a ceasefire to an arms embargo? How do we actually stop the flow of weapons that are coming from the United States to Israel, given that over 65% of the weapons that are used in Israel actually come from the United States? We knew that the government wasn't listening to us. We had exhausted every single avenue. And we said that we need to actually take up what we call a people's arms embargo. If the government's not going to give it to us, then we as the people are going to demand an arms embargo, and we're going to force it through every avenue that we have with grassroots organizations, with labor, with our people power from the bottom up. And so we started to have a conversation about actually what different industries we could target. And first, we looked at weapons manufacturers, and weapons manufacturers are obviously an important target for us to take on. And it's very difficult to convince a weapons manufacturer that they should stop making weapons. You can't isolate.
Aisha, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We just want to pause for one moment because we have an issue with our captioning. One of our captioners lost internet, so we're just going to pause for one moment while we get that fixed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should be set now. Thank you.
No problem. Are we good? Can you see everything? Okay. Okay. So you know, we first looked at different weapons manufacturers, and it was difficult for us to create campaign logic that said that we can isolate a portion of their economic portfolio around weapons. Obviously, their entire business is around making weapons. And so we decided to actually start tracking the different ways that it flows from the United States over to Israel. And at that point, we realized that we should take on a logistics company, a large shipping company. And so we started doing some research into the largest shipping companies in the world. And very clear and very quickly, we were able to see that Maersk is a bad actor across many different fronts. And so, we realized that Maersk is, one of the most profitable companies in the world. They make about $22 billion worth of profits annually. And they also produce about 1% of all greenhouse emission gases every year of the entire world. That's how big of a company they are. And so we realized that we would be able to go after Maersk for their role in genocide, their facilitation of this genocide, because they were a large company, and we would be able to isolate the part of their economic, their profits, basically, that have a relationship to the Israeli military of defense. And so in May of 2023, we launched officially the Mask Off Maersk campaign at the People's Conference, which was the largest conference for Palestinians in diaspora in the United States, at least over the past 30 years. And so we launched this campaign, and we went to work. Everybody was taking up banner drops, wheat pasting, we were flyering, we were phone banking, we were talking to different unions, and we had different human rights organizations actually call on Maersk and tell them that they needed to stop facilitating the flow of military cargo to Israel. And Maersk responded publicly by saying that they care about human rights, and they have a strict policy that they don't ship weapons or ammunition to a conflict zone. And this is across the board, that they don't do this. But we were able to, through our connections, prove that they were actually facilitating the flow of military cargo. And one of the things that we learned, that usually the way this military cargo flows is actually from the Port of New Jersey and the Port of Houston, and then docks in Spain before it goes to Israel. So we sent a briefing to the Spanish government alongside Progressive International, which is a very close partner with us, basically demanding that the Spanish government investigate. And they responded, and they said that this does violate their arms embargo. And so they would do an investigation. And within 2 days of that investigation, the Spanish government, just this week, actually rejected 2 ships that had military cargo aboard it that were destined for Israel. And so those 2 ships went scrambling across the Mediterranean. And they were diverted to Turkey and to Morocco, the port of Tangier. And this was met now with popular resistance. So workers in Morocco refused to work this ship. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were protesting in the streets. And we created a diplomatic crisis for Israel. Essentially, now there's a conversation about where is Maersk going to be able to dock in the future, because they've been using Spain up until now. And Morocco, as they have normalized with Israel, still has a choice about whether they're going to allow the flow of military cargo to specifically go through its ports. And the same with Turkey. Turkey has an arms embargo. And so is Turkey going to actually allow the flow of military cargo to go through its ports? And so I wanted to share this story with you because, when we originally launched this campaign, it was completely a grassroots initiative that just came with some young folks who were really dedicated to actually enacting a people's arms embargo. We did our research, and we built our coalition to build with other organizations around the world. And through our people power, we have been able to actually create a crisis, a diplomatic crisis, for anybody who is invested and profiting off of this genocide. And so we haven't felt many wins since the beginning of this genocide, and ceasefire proved to be not having the material impact that we needed. But this campaign has shown us that we are actually able to enact a people's arms embargo. And so I invite you all to go to our website, maskoffmaersk.com, sign our petition, follow us at the Palestinian Youth Movement on Instagram. to stay updated with our next calls to action, our phone banking calls to action, and we will tell you how we're going to bring this campaign more locally back to our home ports here in the United States. So thank you so much for having me on this call today, and I hope to see you in the streets.
Thank you, Aisha. I hope to see all of us on the streets as well. And thank you for your incredibly important work and your words, showing the connections between genocidal projects across time and space. So thank you again, Aisha, for being here. Hello, I am Sarah Bradley. It's a real honor to be with you all, with the amazing elders and organizers here today. I am a light-skinned woman with dark brown hair, wearing a dark gray turtleneck in front of some books. I live on Tewa Pueblo land in what is now called Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm a co-founder of Land Justice Futures, formerly known as the Nuns and Nuns Land Justice Project. I was asked to share a bit about my organization's little corner of the movement ecosystem. And I was also asked to help us get out our wallets too. So that's what I'm going to be doing with you today. I come from a mix of European lineages that were settlers on Turtle Island. And in my organizing work, my task is to bring together and educate people like me, fellow settler descendants, and particularly white women of Catholic or Christian backgrounds, and organize us to do the work of decolonization and Indigenous solidarity because of the particular responsibility we carry for the unjust status quo. In our organization, Land Justice Futures, we work with Black and Indigenous movement partners and religious communities, specifically communities of Catholic sisters or nuns, to create land transitions rooted in racial and ecological healing, centering land back and reparations in property decisions. We are currently working with 15 different communities of sisters across the country who have committed to a multi-year process to center land justice in their property decisions. And we're working to build trust, relationship, and follow protocols with neighboring local land stewards and nations who might be interested in partnership. This work is currently super centered on relationship because it also came out of relationship. It's a long story of how we got here, but it's important to note that we were organized into this work by Black and Indigenous-led organizations with whom we had relationship, as well as sisters. And I want to make that connection because Sarah Nahar mentioned the way in which anti-colonial arrivants came out through relationship on this call. And so I want to center the role of relationship in our movements as we do this work together. So Land Justice Futures is only a few years old, and we know that this kind of work is generational. We're in it for the long haul. But even now, there are meaningful victories. Several of our communities have initiated formal processes to explore legal agreements for upcoming land transitions with their Indigenous neighbors and partners. Some are deeply involved in accountability processes related to residential boarding schools. And believe it or not, sisters are advocating for land back in their own communities, bringing it to their leadership, putting things to a vote in their assemblies, speaking about it publicly, on stage at nun conferences, which are a thing. And there is so far to go. The harm is so pervasive and so deep. And I want to convey this message that there are so many sisters who are taking to heart the call to land justice, to repair, and to right relationship, and who are running with it. One of the new things that has come out of this work is a movement for mother law and to be complicit no more. This idea was instigated specifically by our Haudenosaunee partners, condoled Bear Clan mother Mama Bear Louise Hearn of Mohawk Nation, and Michelle Shenandoah of Oneida Nation, and from whom I have permission to speak of this with you today. This is a two-pronged movement, mother law and complicit no more, like two wings of the same bird. And in it, standing in solidarity and partner and power with our partners, we seek to remove our consent, our material, our psychological, and our spiritual consent from the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery that Sarah Nahar mentioned, that ideology and worldview and active legal doctrine that underpins settler colonialism here on Turtle Island and all around the world. And in its place, we seek to reawaken the seeds of mother law within our own cultures and lineages and realign ourselves with ways of being, governing, and relating that honor life. Now, I don't have time to get into detail with all that mother law and complicit no more are and its matrilineal roots, but you can look into it with the links in the chat. And overall, you can understand it as a way in which we are heeding the call to dismantle colonial myths, defend Indigenous rights, and honor Mother Earth. And we do this work, me as a settler, I do this work because it's the right thing to do, because I'm committed deeply to our partners in this work for life, and because it is in my own shared interest for our collective future. Which brings me to my ask to you. I ask for you to show up to this call today with your resources. Because we are not going to live into a just and livable future without decolonization, without Indigenous self-determination, without dismantling the colonial lies. It just will not happen. There's no justice, there's no sustainability or regeneration of life without rematriation and reparations, without a massive redistribution of power, land, and wealth. So I'm asking you to give what you can now, whether that's $100, $50, or $5. You can even set up a recurring donation. We are looking for monthly donors to Donatiera. Last year, Tupac passed away at the age of 71, and we want to honor his 71 years by getting 71 new monthly donors. Could you be one of those 71 new monthly donors in honor of Tupac? Please consider setting up a recurring donation now. Because we need this, y'all. Empire, settler colonialism, white supremacy, whatever it is that you want to call the beast, is a death cult, and we need to be resourcing and building a movement of movements for life. And that is what supporting Donatiera is. So, did you donate? Come on now. This is us. We are, what are we now? 800 people. 800 people can do a lot, and this is our shared future. We are seeking to heal the past, the present, and the future. And so if this is a priority for you, I really hope you'll be making a recurring donation to Donatiera today. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to be in movement with you all.
This is Betty. Thank you so much, Sarah. And she's right. We can't change all of this without that help. Resources are desperately needed. And so we appreciate any and all donations, no matter how big or how small. We really appreciate all of you for your time and that you're spending with us, and hoping that you can, give what you can. We know that these times are very different. Now, I would like to turn my attention and respect and love and care by introducing someone who is so close to me. Not only a sister in this work, we've known each other for decades. She has shown and proven herself time and time again. Her character is above reproach. And I can't say enough about this woman. Eve Reyes Aguirre is a community activist and advocate for social and environmental justice who represents the Isla Boteca Mexica peoples based in Phoenix, Arizona, the traditional territory of the Otham peoples. Through the work at Donatiera, Eve has spent decades working on issues affecting Indigenous peoples. Eve emphasizes the importance of grassroots organizing and building sustainable solutions to address systemic inequalities. Eve also represents her community annually at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, where she has served as a co-chair and rapporteur for the United Nations Global Indigenous Peoples Caucus and the Women's Caucus. Without her work there, she has been a backbone over these past few decades. We are so saddened by the loss of Tupac and know how hard it has been for her to continue that work. So right now, I would like you to all give a warm welcome to Evie.
Thank you so much, Betty. You honor me with your words. This is Evie, Amishpan Cinco, no Wanyolke, Kwali Yowali. Good evening or good afternoon to those of you on the Pacific time frame, and good evening to those on the Eastern side, and good tomorrow for our folks on the other side of the world. If you're joining us from there, as Betty mentioned, I work with Dona Tierra. I have worked with this organization that serves as a cultural embassy for Indigenous peoples for close to 27 years. And I also wanted to share that I am also a board member for Honor the Earth. And I am proud to be a part of the new leadership and the 90% staff that is Indigenous there now at our organization. We are undergoing a new transformation there. And we are so honored to have the PYM, the Palestinian Youth Movement, as part of one of our affiliates. And I am very honored to be a part of the All Indigenous Women Board there, who also, Betty Lyons also shares that title with me as a board member. So we are really excited to be a part of the new leadership and take Honor the Earth in a really good direction going forward. Especially with the work that we're doing with our relatives who are currently experiencing a genocide in Gaza, our Palestinian relatives. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our theme, dismantling colonial myths, uplifting Indigenous rights, and honoring Mother Earth. The first thing I think that we need to talk about is decolonization and what that means. One of the things that our elder Tupac had always talked about, and that we've been talking about him today, so I thought it was fitting to share some of his words. But one of the things that he said was that we have to understand how colonization has affected the descendants of the colonizers and how they are also experiencing historical trauma through their actions today. And so really, it's important for us to recognize that, but also to recognize that we can change our future, that there are things that we can do as individuals, even though it feels like we don't have the power to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's not true. But the other thing that I wanted to mention too, when it comes to decolonization and what that means and how it is that we get back to a place where we are living in balance and harmony with our planet, with our earth, with our waterways, with our environment. To decolonize is not something that happens overnight. Here we are, we're speaking English and Spanish. Those are colonizing languages for Indigenous peoples in various territories throughout the world even. And so decolonization is a generational process. It didn't begin here with us, and it won't end here with us. One of the worldview ways that Indigenous people have is when we think about the things that we're doing in our communities, the decisions that we have to make, the important decisions that we have to make, we think about our 7 generations ahead of us. We think about our children and their children and what that's going to look like for them, what future is going to look like for them, what our planet is going to look like for them. So decolonization is a process, and it's a generational process. Tupac would always say it took us 500 plus years to get where we are. It may take us another 500 and plus years to get back to where we want to go. And so when you start to kind of embody that and understand that this is not an event, it's an eventuality, another thing that Tupac would say, you start to understand that, we have to do what we can while we're here. And I want people to really understand that, because I know after this post-election time here in the US, a lot of people are feeling very discouraged. They're feeling very deflated. And as an Indigenous woman, all I can say is, now you know how we have felt for the last 500 years. We recognize and understand that the colonial governments have never had our Indigenous interests at heart. And so it's important to recognize that. It's important to know sometimes through this political process, there's this misconception that progressive leaders and progressive politicians and folks that are centered or that are stand on the political left are actually working for Indigenous rights. But I can tell you that that is not true. And all we need to do is look back at history. And I think this year, people really made a really loud statement when they elected the next leader of this country. I don't even want to say his name, but and it's because of the policies, because of the non-action around an active genocide that's happening. People are listening, people are watching. As Indigenous peoples here on this continent, we can empathize with what our relatives in Gaza are experiencing. We got to read about it in history books or through our ancestors and our elders telling us the stories of our history and our peoples. However, now we get to see it happen and unfold in real time through social media. And that is very triggering for a lot of Indigenous peoples here. We get to see what happened to our people, the real life genocide happening to our relatives there now. And it's so extremely frustrating. But I want to make sure that we're understanding that we can do something. The work that we do here on the ground through our grassroots organizations is mobilizing the people. My dear sister Aisha shared information on how people power makes a difference. It changes the minds of others. It changes the thought processes. And I will say right now that our non-Indigenous allies, you all who are on this webinar, are our biggest hope for moving forward in this work. You all play a big role in this movement with us through your support, through sharing of the information that you're receiving today, and by uplifting your voices in solidarity. And so we've seen it through social media. We've seen it through other avenues where you all are speaking. Our voices have been drowned out for generations. However, your voices are still loud and clear, especially to your own people. And so we really do depend a lot on you all to help us in our fight. And even though I say our fight, I feel like we began this fight as an Indigenous fight, as an Indigenous movement, but in reality, we're fighting for all of us. This planet belongs to us. This water belongs to us. The food systems belong to us. We as people, as humans, right? And so, Mother Earth doesn't discriminate. And we've seen that. We've seen that happen with the flooding. We've seen it happen with the pandemics. We've seen it happen. We're watching it happen in current time with the earthquakes and just all of the things that are happening around the planet when it comes to climate change. We're all seeing it and it's affecting all of us. It's not an Indigenous issue anymore. And so even though we're thinking about our 7 generations ahead, we're also thinking about yours. And so, dismantling colonial myths, I'm gonna jump into that. the reason why we wanted to talk about dismantling colonial myths is because it's really important for us to understand that when we're doing this work, we have to know the history and really the intention of solutions that are coming forward that are supposed to be helping our people. And so one of the examples is, everybody's talking about electric vehicles and, oh, we're going to be moving away from fossil fuels and we're going to be installing wind turbines, in order to produce electricity. And we're going to do all of these wonderful green projects. We've all know about the Green New Deal, and we've heard about all of these different methods of mitigating climate change. But I want to give you the real deal about it, right? So when moving over to electric vehicles, you have to think about, well, what does that entail? Well, we're talking about lithium mining, we're talking about nickel mining, we're talking about cobalt mining. And that is another form of extractive industry. That's the same thing. What we're doing is, instead of pulling fossil fuels out of the ground, we're pulling out lithium and we're pulling out cobalt. And unfortunately, the communities and the peoples that suffer first and that are affected by this are Indigenous peoples. So it's important for us to understand that when we're talking about colonial myths, this is one of them. The fact that these colonial governments are always wanting to find ways to mitigate climate change that actually are more harmful than good. And what I mean by that is, instead of divesting and instead of finding real solutions, they are creating solutions that actually either don't work, don't help, or further the issue when it comes to advancing climate change. Or at this point, we call it climate chaos, because that's really where we're at. And geoengineering is a really good example. If you don't know what geoengineering is, please, 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 I urge you to Google it right now. I know you all have your phones available, and just look at it. And I will tell you that when I first started working advocating and fighting against geoengineering projects, which Dona Tierra was successful in shutting one down along with our other allies, Indigenous and non-Indigenous allies alike, down in Tucson, Arizona. These are false solutions. And frankly, if you read through these proposed projects, they are really very much like science fiction. You have to ask yourself, is this real? And when you understand that there are educational institutions like Harvard that are backing projects like this, we really have to stand back and ask ourselves, is blocking out the sun a solution? Is, pouring microbeads into the ocean the right answer? And I think our young people here, even in our own community, could be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. We learn a lot from our youth, and even they as young people can see that that's not the right answer. And so this is just, one of the areas of false solutions. Of course, I don't know if many of you have heard about carbon capturing and the RED programs that have been really pushed down onto our relatives in the South. Carbon trading is a process of purchasing carbon credits from other countries so that you can continue to pollute in your respective country. Now, that doesn't sound, like a real solution. As a matter of fact, it's proven in recent years to be a false solution and to have absolutely no positive effect in mitigating climate change. So, when these colonial governments talk about spending imaginary dollars on imaginary credits, in order for them to continue to pollute, that is not an answer. That is not an answer. And unfortunately, these colonial governments are also trying to put words in our mouths by saying, well, look, we're developing all these green solutions. You said that you wanted more eco-friendly options. We're putting wind turbines up in, these areas and down in the South. Yet these wind turbines are being put on top of indigenous territories on sacred lands where their traditional foods grow. And only in those areas do those traditional foods grow. An entire indigenous community was displaced in order to put in a wind turbine. And so these are not the kind of real solutions that we need as indigenous peoples. But the only way that we can fight against them is by knowing about them. We have to have that knowledge. We have to know what these projects really entail in order for us to be effective in cutting them down and calling out these colonial governments to say that these are not real solutions. And so through this work, we get a lot of questions about, well, what are the solutions? What can we do? What is the answer? And the answer is that there's no real one answer. That question, it will depend on your community and what you can do in your community. But I will say this, that indigenous peoples have answers. We have traditional knowledge. We lived on this planet since time immemorial, before colonization, and we were able to live in balance for thousands of years. Yet we're looking at colonization happening and our planet being destroyed within 200 years. I mean, I don't understand how folks don't run and try to support indigenous knowledge, like right away. It kind of boggles my mind to think that you wouldn't put two and two together and understand that indigenous peoples have been doing this forever and we have answers. But because our knowledge is not something that comes from an academic institution or from a scientist with a degree, it's dismissed as not real knowledge. And that's an issue that we struggle with as indigenous peoples. For many, many years, we've struggled with really trying to validate our knowledge, our traditional knowledge. And so that's not, we want to make sure that even through the experts of the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put out a report a few years back, and I encourage you guys to look at it. It is a report on climate change that specifically states that indigenous peoples have the knowledge to mitigate climate change. And it urges member states and colonial governments to constantly work with indigenous peoples on climate change projects, on mitigating climate change. So even their own experts are now saying what our relatives have been saying, for the last 100 years at the United Nations, when it was the League of Nations. So these are just one of the ways that we can dismantle those colonial myths. And the other thing that I wanted to share is when we're talking about uplifting Indigenous rights, this is uplifting our rights. It's supporting the work that we're doing. It's talking about the issues that we're having. And one of our really dear friends, Edward Valandra, who is a Lakota man, we work together on advocating for honoring the treaties. And we work with other Indigenous organizations globally who also have treaties with their colonial governments. And one of the things that he said that was really, really important was he was giving a talk to some non-Indigenous relatives and told them, you all are, if you identify as US citizens and you call yourself a US citizen, a citizen of this country, and you acknowledge this US government as your government, then you are a party to the treaty. You are the US representation of that treaty with my nation. That is what he said. And he said, therefore, you have a responsibility to uphold your end of the treaty. And that is absolutely true. As US citizens, you all have the voices to advocate for the respect and honoring of those treaties. And that is your right as a people who is a part of this government, who is a government of the people, right? You all have that responsibility. So please don't feel like you don't have the power, you don't have a say. According to those treaty documents, you are all just as responsible as the US government to ensure that those treaties are upheld. Just as we are as Indigenous peoples, we stand in solidarity with our Indigenous relatives to uphold their end of the treaties. And so, this is another piece of how we can uplift our Indigenous rights. And lastly, I wanted to talk really quickly about honoring Mother Earth. Honoring Mother Earth is something that Indigenous peoples do on the daily basis. How can non-Indigenous folks honor the earth? That is a very good question. One of the things is we know that recycling doesn't work. We know that, turning off your electricity is not going to do much. Not when we have giant corporations and a military institutions throughout the planet that are constantly polluting the earth and causing great damage. And so really, recycling is a wonderful thing. Don't get me wrong. However, I think we need to do more. I think we need to recognize that we as citizens and people and community, we are not the polluters. We are not the ones that are desecrating the land. We are not the ones that are contaminating the land, water, air. We are not the ones who are the biggest contributors to climate change. But we are the ones who have the voices to make change. And we have to make a systematic change in doing so. And so what can we do? Well, exactly what Aisha had shared earlier today and what Juan had shared earlier today about getting involved at the grassroots level. It's a wonderful thing that through these rethinking webinars, we were able to develop folks here as participants were able to develop other networks outside of it. Making those connections. The anti-colonial arrivants came out of this webinar where now they are organizing and doing good work to help uplift this movement. Because again, we may address things as an Indigenous, movement, but again, this is for all of us. And so I just want to thank you all for your time, for listening to all of the speakers today, and really to say that you have the power to make the change, to help us by getting involved, looking at all of the links. We're going to be sharing the links that are that everyone has been talking about today with all of the information in a toolkit. I also want to invite you all to come out next Sunday, November 24th. We're going to have a follow-up. I know this style of a webinar is very difficult because you all probably have burning questions, but next Sunday, we're going to have the opportunity to invite you back so that we can actually have a dialogue and really talk about what we can do to move forward in this work together. So Tlazo Kamati to all of our relatives who joined us here today. And I really hope that you take the time to donate to the great work that's happening here on the ground. We really appreciate all of you taking the time on a Sunday to rethink Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much, Evie. I'm Michaela. I'm a white-skinned femme with long, dark, curly hair. I'm wearing a black shirt. I'm joining from the land of the Catawba and Eastern Cherokee here in Western North Carolina, where we're still reeling from the impacts of Hurricane Helene, the most deadly hurricane on this continent since since Katrina. I just want to take a moment and invite everyone on this call to just pause for a second and take a deep breath. And notice what's happening in your body, what you're feeling. I invite you to think about what you've heard today. If you've learned something, if you felt something, I invite you to put your hand on your heart. I invite you to take another deep breath with me. Gratitude to Evie, to Betty, to Juan, to Sarah, Aisha. And I invite you, if something has moved you, taught you, today, I invite you to click the link in the chat, and I invite you to put your money where your heart is. I want to remind you that the first 25 people who donate $500 or more are going to get a thank you package that includes original art as well as coffee from Tona Tierra's Indigenous Coffee Cooperative. As a reminder, all the money that we raise today is going to support the work of Tona Tierra. The Indigenous Coffee Cooperative buys direct from Indigenous folks. It's better than fair trade. It's Indigenous trade. And this is just one program among many other incredible programs that Tona Tierra is doing in schools for language and culture, mutual aid for farm workers, youth programs, from grassroots to the United Nations. Tona Tierra is bridging across movements across and beyond colonial borders. And they're doing it as a mostly volunteer-led grassroots organization. So this money that you give today for them is so meaningful. Becoming a sustaining monthly donor is even more meaningful for a small grassroots organization like this, to be able to know that they have consistent sources and people who are in this with them. So again, I invite you to go to the link in the chat. And while y'all are hopefully making a sustaining commitment to support this work and honor the teachings that we've heard today, I'd like to share a poem. Originally, I had planned to share a poem about climate, about the things that I'm experiencing personally, navigating the impacts of Hurricane Helene. But today I woke up and also just thinking so much of Tupac, who others have named and brought into the space. He left us too soon last year, 71 years old, and I'm really grateful for what I was able to learn from him. And so I wrote a poem about that as a surprise to myself and for all of us. I'm going to read that now. I walk in the forest, wishing for the wisdom of alternate knowing, wanting to follow the way of the good and the growing. Here we are together amidst a churning, burning place, searching, hoping for meaning, connection, a purposeful space. None of us know it all or are done with learning. There is room for more understanding, for shifting, for growing. There's so many things I might say to you, but I'd like to share some things that Tupac from Tona Tierra helped me understand are true. He said, the first victim of colonization is the colonizer, the shifter, the grifter, the stand for nothing compromiser. What they did to themselves in order to make someone else other is to violently separate themselves from the family with earth as our mother. And what do some know of this world but what they are taking? And what is this world but what we are making? How do we tune into a message of creation, of healing, of hope, of rematriation? With so many struggles and so much to do, I think about what Tupac from Tona Tierra taught me is true. When he spoke about colonization, he spoke about the intentional alienation and forced disorientation. How separating people from land, language, culture, tradition disorients them with intention for submission to capitalist conditions. When I think of colonization, I think of the names I was forced to memorize of those who terrorized, pillaged, and burned. I think of those forgotten and of those never learned. What are the stories we tell ourselves? And what are the stories that we are told? The myths in this system where everything is something to be extracted and sold. And there are casualties in the millions, just so a few are able to hold billions. I think of who we might all be if not for this terrible blueprint being knitted and stretched ahead. If we didn't have to sharpen ourselves into scissors or risk being strung for thread. With a system so painful for me, so painful for you, I think of what Tupac from Tona Tierra would tell us is true. He would call us not to be complacent. He said, we don't have any time to waste, so we must be patient. He said there is no separation between love and gravity. To get back into balance requires us to act kindly and radically. He told us we are the people of the earth, we who are here now. We must find the way, the returning practice of understanding why, then how. We have to do what we can while we are here, and we know it is challenging. We all feel the fear. We must regain the capacity to be human with each other, to know that we are relatives with the earth as our mother. There's so many things you could do, and I hope you'll be guided by these things Tupac from Tona Tierra taught us are true. Thank you for listening to my poem today. I hope that you will consider going to the link in the chat and committing to a monthly donation. We are really hoping to get 71 monthly donors to honor the 71 years of Tupac's life. So if my words and my poem have moved you today, if you're looking for a way to connect to this work, to put your action where your thoughts and your feelings are, I invite you to sign up to give $5, to give $10 a month, to give what you're able to give. I invite you to share with those in your community and know that this is a way that you can move forward. I also invite you to join us next week on Sunday, November 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern for a really interactive debrief call where we can discuss what we heard today and we can integrate it into our organizing and our lives. And for non-Indigenous people, how to move forward with organizing with Indigenous-led movements. The registration link for that follow-up will be in the chat. Thank you to you all for being here today, not only to the speakers, but to each of you who are here with your time, your care, and your attention. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
This is Betty. Michaela, there are not enough words to describe how moving and beautiful your poem was. And for those of us that were honored and so fortunate to know Tupac and love him and to be loved by him, it was very moving. And I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for that. I want to, at this time, I'm emotional, so I apologize if I'm not coming across very clearly. But I want to now welcome back Juan, Aisha, and Eve back for a conversation to close us out. Do you all have any responses from what you've heard from the other speakers today, each one of you? And do you have anything else that you wanted to add based on what you heard tonight to leave our audience with? So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Betty. I'm hoping we can get Aisha and Juan on the screen as well with us. I just want to say thank you to Michaela for that wonderful poem. It was such a beautiful way to honor Tupac and his legacy and to really, really, really share those teachings. We are here all very fortunate to have been able to work with him and encounter him on a daily basis. And so we recognize how blessed we were. But to see the impact that he had on our relatives internationally is just beyond words. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Michaela for that. And I will defer to Juan and Aisha to share any words that they'd like to say around some of the discussion that we had.
We have about 10 minutes, just so you know.
I was on I had the privilege of sitting and talking with Tupac several times, many times we met. We talked over the phone, and we would talk about, these things that are occurring today. And I do appreciate your poem. It's a nice poem. Thank you very much. And he was quite a gentleman, and I think it's good if any of you are willing to help out with this, some donations to help Tona Tierra. That would be great, and we appreciate any of the help that you have, because I think that it's a start to start looking at coming together and as a group of people that we have connection, and that connection. And I tell people a lot of times, to say, look, you might not like me, and I might not like you, but there's something bigger that we don't like, and that's what's happening to our Mother Earth. And I think that we need to, and if we work together to make the Earth a better place for the future generations, I think for us, we might get to know each other a little bit better and get to like each other. So, I think it's all good for that, instead of trying to compete. And I see that in the, the funding world. And I think if we work together, I think we can all help each other out. Some of us that struggle with, the fundings and the capacities to be able to have those things, it's real difficult, because I can just imagine at the beginning, when Tupac started working with all of this, that it was real difficult. And so and to me, I was moved a lot by what my grandfather said about get our lands back, which I did. We've actually blocked off Enbridge by buying some land that they want now to run their pipeline. And I think it's important, because I think that me and Tupac talked about those things, about blocking it and taking it and saying it, look, even if it's a 501c3, or if it's just that we have the facts about that these places are sacred to us and archaeologically sacred, and bringing our plants back, that makes them even more sacred. And I think that, this farming technique that we need to do to let these things go back to the natural capacity is important. So I think that it's a good thing to, learn to start doing this thing, this trading, this bartering, and maybe even changing the narrative any way it's possible. And I do appreciate, everybody with what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha?
That was beautiful, Juan. Yeah, I just really wanted to uplift the work of Tona Tierra. Betty and Evie, I'm very lucky to call some of my mentors, and I think it's exactly what you said, Juan. The next generation of Indigenous youth is really what's going to be leading us to liberation, to land back, to living in right relationship with the earth. And these women have been absolutely instrumental in that, uplifting the youth, investing in us, giving us a space to even be on a call like this. When we were at the UN, we went for the Indigenous Peoples Forum. It was these two women who made sure that Palestine was included in this conversation, showed the solidarity of Indigenous people around the world, and they really exemplify the type of work and the type of people and the type of organization that we should be invested in, that we should be donating to, that we should be uplifting. And so I'm just really honored to be here with you all. I'm really encouraging everybody on this call to donate to Tona Tierra, and to continue to uplift the work of these amazing ladies. So thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
I also just want to add to the fact that, when they decided to build this division, this wall, to me, there's no borders. And when it happened in Arizona and happened in New Mexico, when it happened here in Texas, we were there, and we had to bring out the fact that they were breaking treaties with all citizens of this country by waiving those 32 laws, but it was 28 at the time. And of course, the ones that were affected the most were the native people, the original peoples of the lands, the Odoms and us, and everyone that's along the river, and because they waived NACFRA and they waived the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Go figure, So it's just throwing it back in their face and telling them, hey, look, y'all are using your words to modify and to redo what you want, and it's not going to happen anymore. Colonization's got to stop.
Absolutely. Thank you both. I wanted to share a little bit more about the international work, and it was such a powerful moment, to have Aisha and Nadia Tanus there alongside us, both at the Global Indigenous Women's Caucus and the Global Indigenous Peoples Caucus. And I know there was a question about, how does the international work connect to the local work? And this was a great example of that. Working on at a grassroots level, Aisha organizes her community there, and as well as Nadia, and they were at the UN. They were advocating for their people alongside all indigenous peoples of the earth, all 7 regions. There were indigenous solidarity with the Palestinian people, and this was a perfect example of how that work connects all of us. People know what's happening around the world. People are connecting. People are understanding that we are fighting the same battles. And that's the wonderful thing about solidarity work, is that we can figure out ways to work together to continue the work. And one of the things I also wanted to mention was, with this current, or with the new administration coming in, I know there's a lot of fear around, what's going to happen, especially to people of color, especially to migrants, especially to indigenous migrants. And anyone who doesn't have white skin, it seems, is on the chopping block. And so it's really important, again, to be very educated on how we got to this point. And part of that is understanding the history. A lot of these people who are here seeking refuge, or who have migrated for various reasons, it's important to know why did they migrate? What is it that caused them to leave their homelands? Because that's one question that nobody in the media ever talks about when they want to talk about refugees, when they want to talk about displacement, when they want to talk about, they don't even call it displacement. When they want to talk about immigration is how they frame it. And they don't talk about the trade agreements that the US enters in with other colonial governments, and how those trade agreements displace indigenous peoples and contaminate their waters by allowing these corporations to go into these territories in order to make money that is going to benefit these corporations. And all the while displacing indigenous peoples who have been in those territories since time immemorial. So again, it goes back into understanding the history, right? Because right now, there are laws that have been passed, especially here in Arizona. Several years ago, we had SB 1070. Now we have Proposition 314, which is the SB 1070 2.0, which will criminalize anyone who is undocumented in this country, and make it a felony to be in existence here. I mean, we're talking about people who have families and roots. We're talking about the farm workers who grow the food that we are eating on our tables every single day. We're talking about the day labor workers who are on the ground doing the work. Literally building infrastructure for this country. And we all know the history of that, right? We all know that the history of this country was built on stolen land and indigenous and African labor, slave labor. We know this to be true. And yet, our people are being criminalized. And last thing I will close with and say that You have to know that we live in a system that was not meant for us. When people can be criminalized for existing in territories that they traveled through and back and forth since time immemorial, and have a leader come into office with a known felonies, 36 or 39 felonies, and he is allowed to be president of the United States. How have we gotten to a point where our relatives, our brothers and sisters of color get one felony and cannot get a job working at a convenience store? Yet we have this criminal and this, oh, I have so many names for him, but I will keep it clean. But we have this criminal that's coming into office, the highest office in the world, to a world leader that has 39 felonies or 36, I can't remember. I lost count after one. But this is crazy, right? I mean, you have to ask yourself, is this really a democracy? Is this really the system that we want to hand down to our children? Or are we going to make a change? So I just want to say thank you for all of your words today, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much. All of you panelists have been absolutely amazing. And before we close, I want to just kind of center this back to something that Tupac always said. It's about the territorial integrity of Mother Earth, right? She's always and often lost in all of this. And I want to lift up something that Sarah and Evie both talked about, the doctrine of discovery that started the transatlantic slave trade, started white nationalism, white supremacy, that hierarchical systems that were meant to disconnect us from all other living beings that we know as Indigenous peoples are our relatives, are now seen as commodities. You know, everything that's happening in the climate crisis will affect us all. And so we've already hit over $13,000. And I'm asking you all for this final push to get us to our goal tonight. And I also want to leave you with something, you know, like, let's not just talk about it, as Raji says, let's be about it. So whatever you can give, whether it's 5, 10, you know, a monthly donor, whatever that is, please give what you can. And I want to congratulate Aisha on those victories that she talked about. It's absolutely amazing. And, you know, I want to leave you with one final thing. My uncle, Orrin Lyons, came over and brought a climatologist report to my home. And I want to talk about that as we do this final push for more money, and you're getting your cards out and you're making those donations. You know, the global population right now is at 8.12 billion people. Greenhouse gas emissions is now at 40.4 gigatons. Surface air temperature has already risen 1.28 Celsius. Sea level change has gone up 63.8 millimeters. We have lost 5,470 gigatons of ice in the past year. Global tree cover loss in 1 year, 11.9 million hectares. And so as we follow up, as we close up tonight, please join us next week on Sunday, November 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern for a highly interactive debriefing call where we can discuss what we heard today and how to integrate this information into our organizing for non-Indigenous peoples, how to move forward, uniting your organizations and organizing with Indigenous-led movements. We will drop the registration link for that follow-up in the chat. I also want to say to everyone, I want to thank the speakers. There will be a recording of this webinar. We have a Rethinking Thanksgiving Toolkit and a follow-up webinar in take-home form. And, you know, think about the ways that we can take action. I want to thank to the ASL and Spanish interpreters, as well as live caption writers. Thanks to all the tech support chat moderators, and thanks to the webinar organizers. You know, Niwaha for spending the last 2 hours with us, and we are grateful for all of your donations and your time. Remember, we need to rely on one another. We're all allies and we're all in this together, and know that every decision that we make today will impact the next 7 generations yet unborn. With that, I'm so grateful for all of you. Again, thank you. Good night.